Welcome, everybody, to our monthly Chocolatey product live stream for December 2024. This is the final installment for 2024. There's only 19 days until Christmas, or 384 days until next Christmas. So make sure you get all that shopping done. Today, we're going to look at something a little bit special. If you're a Chocolatey for Business customer and you manage your endpoints with Chocolatey Central Management, then you're in the right place today. More on that in a little second. So before we go into that, get notified of all the great Chocolatey content, either our live streams or previous live streams or the videos we've got too. But you can do that by joining our community hub on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, and clicking the notification bell. Really important, because that bell will make sure that you get notified when there's new content coming through. And you can also follow us on all the social media things. Follow us on Twitter or X, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Twitch. You can find all the links for those at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org, and in the description of wherever you found this video. We want to make sure that the content we're streaming here today is what you want to see. We've put together a very quick 10-second survey, which we would really appreciate you completing at the end of the stream today. You can find the link in the description, but it's also on screen there just now. It's ch0.co/stream survey. It literally will take you 10 seconds. There are 3 questions. Only one is mandatory, and that's just to rate the stream. The other 2 are optional, where you can tell us about the content that you would like to see. So, my name is Paul Broadith, and I'm the Technical Engineering Manager here at Chocolatey Software. I lead the engineering team that's responsible for the products that we'll be talking about today. And my co-host this month is none other than Josh King. Josh.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Do you want to introduce yourself, Josh?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Josh King. I'm an Senior Infrastructure Operations Engineer here at Chocolatey.
Awesome. Okay, as I mentioned at the start, today we'll be looking at something a little bit special. We're going to be looking at the connections between Chocolatey Agent and Chocolatey Central Management, specifically securing those connections using allow list, VPNs, and more. Josh will be the master of ceremonies today, and I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that and be popping in and out as well. But Josh, take it away.
Thank you. So yes, today the main thing we're going to be talking about is that connectivity between your agents and CCM, or Chocolatey Central Management. We won't be talking too much about what CCM is. My colleague Chris White did a stream on that back in August, so I'd encourage you to go and watch that and read the blog that accompanied it. But before we get into that connectivity between the agent and CCM itself, I wanted to quickly go over some general security best practices for Chocolatey Central Management deployment. So generally speaking, CCM has a number of components and you can install them all on one box. So there's a service that your clients connect into, and there's the web interface that your admins use to manage your CCM environment and do deployments and run reports and all that stuff. And you can even run the database on that same server. But rather than doing that, one of the suggestions we would make around security is to separate out those components of it. So you can, first of all, have your, if it wants to transition for me, you can have your database as a dedicated SQL instance. It does need to be Microsoft SQL, but this could be SQL Server running on a VM somewhere. It could be a actual managed service, say RDS running in AWS. Then you could have a dedicated server that's just running the CCM service. And this is where your Chocolatey agents would all connect into. And of course, your Chocolatey agent could be any endpoint, any Windows endpoint in your infrastructure. So that could be other servers, desktops, even stuff, laptops. And then on a separate server, you install the CCM web service. And this is, of course, where your admins connect into. So what this allows is for you tightly controlling the admin interface and only allowing your trusted admins to even be able to touch that server. And then you can put the CCM service, say, in a DMZ, because you might need to allow agents to connect to it that you don't want to be able to connect to any other servers in your infrastructure. And then the CCM web one can be locked behind the firewall and no one could get remote access to it, or whatever works for your environment. And then what you can also do is these connections into your SQL server. These can use different authentication methods. They could use different accounts, and then of course that then limits the scope. If say your CCM server was breached somehow, it then means you're only having to roll the credentials for that part of your setup and not the other part. And one thing that'll come up soon, and this is probably a good diagram to show it, is all of the communication between the Chocolatey agents and CCM are initiated from the agents. So the agents call out to CCM service. So say if you've got a deployment, they will check in and find out if they've got a deployment and then pull the information back. So let's talk about various ways to get your agents talking to CCM. The first one and the most simple is when you've got internal only clients. And of course, you can mix and match all of these different scenarios. But this is where your agents and the CCM server are all on the same network, and you just have a DNS record for the CCM service, and all of your agents just use that record, that name, to talk to CCM directly. There's then nothing stopping at a network level new agents connecting in if they're on your network. Although one thing I forgot to mention on the best practices slide is to always configure the communication salts. They are strings that are used to encrypt the communication between the service and the agents. And there's two of them: one for messages created by the client that are being sent to the server, and another for messages from the server that are being read by the client. So you configure both of those on both the server and the clients, and that encrypts the communication for you. The next scenario is when you've got external clients, but with known static IPs. So in this scenario, you still obviously got your CCM server, but now there's a firewall in between that server and the clients. Now this could be another network on your corporate LAN, or it could be over the internet. But what you're going to have to do here is potentially, if it is completely outside your network, you're going to have to be poking holes in the firewall for the public IP addresses for those clients. So this is fine if you've got, like I say at the top, known static IPs, because what you don't want is to be changing those rules all the time as people move IP addresses. And in general, I wouldn't recommend this because of that heavy admin overhead. Especially if you're dealing with employee devices, because chances are they are going to be moving IPs, and you're going to be forever chasing and doing moves, adds, and changes to your firewall rules, which isn't fun. So Beyond that, we can go and start connecting those external clients via a VPN. So then, rather than having to manage firewall rules where you're typing in IP addresses and trying to keep those all up to date, you're now giving your clients something that they can run to get a network connection back into your infrastructure and connect to the CCM server. Now, this does mean that you're either having to have an always-on VPN on the clients, or you're relying on clients remembering to turn on the VPN. And the other thing is a VPN generally drops you onto a network or a subnet on a network, which then means you're potentially having to think about what else is on that subnet that you've now allowed those clients to talk to potentially. So that's something to keep in mind with a VPN. Of course, VPN is very common. So chances are you've already got one in a corporate environment. But the one that I'm going to be diving into some more today and demoing is actually connecting external clients via a tunnel. So there's a number of, well, the full name would be a Zero Trust tunnel, which you can allow connectivity between a client and an endpoint for just a specific network port. And you can control access with policies. So whoever's connecting needs to be a specific user, potentially in a specific group. And depending on what product you're using for the Zero Trust, maybe the device has to be in a specific state. Maybe it needs up-to-date AV, up-to-date patches before it will be allowed to use that tunnel. So this allows you to connect your clients into your server and then not have to worry about, well, not have to worry, you still should always worry about it, but it limits the possibility of lateral movement because you're only allowing that one specific port to that one specific server. So how that actually looks in practice and what we're going to be demoing it with today, because there are a number of options to achieve these Zero Trust tunnels, is we're going to be using the Zero Trust solution from Cloudflare. So how that looks is you've got your server and you've got your clients. And on the server, you run a agent called Cloudflare D or Cloudflared. And you configure your tunnel on here to advertise what services are available. And then that goes and basically logs in effectively with Cloudflare to say, hey, this tunnel is available. Then your client, and that brings up the tunnel and makes it available. Then your client runs that same agent, the Cloudflare D agent, and it attempts to use that tunnel via Cloudflare, and Cloudflare will check it again, check the client that's connecting against your policies that you've configured. Assuming all goes well there, then the client's able to use the tunnel. And what's interesting here is rather than the client call, say for example, this was running CCM on ccm.example.com, rather than the client connecting to that over the general internet using normal DNS, what the tunnel does is it creates an endpoint on the local machine. So you actually end up talking to local hosts, so either localhost or 127.0.0.1, and that pops it into the tunnel, and then it pops out the other end, also on localhost, but on the server. So that's what we're going to look at today. There has been an amount of setup done ahead of time in the interest of time, but we'll be able to see the end result. So let me pull up my server. There we go. And we'll look at the config quickly. So on my server, I've already got Cloudflare D installed, and it has been configured as a server, as a service, sorry, which means it's running all the time. And while I won't be going into the specifics of how that was set up, I will have links and instructions and all that in a companion blog post, which will be available early next week. So make sure you keep an eye out on the Chocolatey blog for that. At any rate, the configuration here is I've effectively on this server got I haven't followed my own best practices effectively. I've got both the web service and the CCM service itself running on the same box. And what I've done is I've configured two services. Let's separate those out a bit so that they're easier to see. I've configured two services on here so that we can actually use the Cloudflare tunnel to connect to both the web interface and also get agent communication running through it. So the host name here, this is the name of our tunnel. And this does need to be internet resolvable, and it needs to be a domain that Cloudflare manages for you. So here I'm using my own toastit.dev domain. And you could put this as localhost because it's just coming out to the local host on my machine. But because I've got a certificate installed, I wanted to actually use ccm.toastit.dev, which is the actual name of the server. But the key here is if I use that on this machine, it's going to work. But to show how you can configure it for localhost, I've done that for the agent connectivity, where this is just a TCP connection on the Choco port. Sorry, the Choco agent port, and it's got a slightly different host name. Now, the tunnel itself is just a GUID, and effectively these become C names that point at those or aliases that point at the tunnel. So you can have multiple services all running over the one tunnel. And what we can do is on the server, I can see ccm.toastit.dev is working. But if I jump over to another server or another client, this client is internal to my network. And if I open up a browser, I was hoping that would give me a new tab. If I open up a new browser and go to CCM, dev. So I'm on the local network. I can use ccm.toastit.dev and I can get through. And then I can log in. And I can see, well, now I'm logged into CCM. So here I've got, at the moment, the CCM server itself checked in, and I've got two local clients. So these are all just connecting over the local LAN, just directly hitting the CCM server. But now we want to get a remote client connected in. And what we should see, if I jump over to it, so this is my remote client. And if we open up a browser, probably not that browser. We can try a little demonstrating at any rate. ccm.toast, I could type toast it, .dev. Basically, I can't talk to it. And that's because this is a remote machine. It doesn't have direct network access to that server. So on here, we are going to need to set up the agent connection itself. So I believe on this machine, let me just double check where we've left it. I've got Chocolatey installed and I've already got a license applied to this machine. So what I'm going to need to do is I need to install the agent and then set it up so that it can actually talk to CCM. And one thing I'll show is I've actually set up DNS so that if you, outside of my network, try to look up ccm.toastit.dev, it's resolving to localhost. That's been done so that when the tunnel's running and you try and hit ccm.toastit.dev, it's going to automatically, the client is automatically going to try and use that tunnel. So let's go and install the Cloudflare Agent. Of course, now's the time that my keyboard wants to play up on me. Chocolatey Agent, rather. So we're going to install that. And then we need to configure the agent as well once it's been installed. And I won't make you watch me type out all of that. I've got it ready to go. Of course, when I was testing this, or planning for this demo, the download went a lot quicker than this, so I didn't think to cache it locally. There we go. And we're done. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do to configure the agent is I need to tell it where central management is. And so I'm telling it ccm.toastit.dev, remembering that that on this machine is going to reference the local host. So what this allows me to do is by using DNS, I can then use the same configuration everywhere and it will work regardless of whether it's internal, external. The only difference being what DNS tells the client is the correct address. So internally it'll actually resolve, externally it'll redirect to the local host. So I've told it that. Then I need to enable some features, which is telling it to use Chocolatey Central Management and also use deployments. And then, like I said before, we need to do the communication salts. So rather than showing my salts, I've saved them into variables that have loaded as part of my profile. But that's the command there, chococonfig set name, and it's a mouthful, central management client communication salt additive password. And same for the service communication salt. And then Yes, that was those. And so that should normally be enough to allow the agent to connect to CCM. So if I were to go and do restart Chocolatey Agent service, we'll have a look at the logs. And while I'm typing, the spoiler alert is, of course, that it can't connect at the moment. The Chocolatey Agent log. Okay. So if we scroll to the bottom, we should see that no connection could be made, which is exactly what we expect at the moment. If you weren't redirecting to localhost, this message would be slightly different, because what this is saying is it couldn't be made because the target machine refused it, and that's because I'm currently looking at localhost, rather than not being able to resolve a name or anything else like that. So let's go and get our tunnel up, and then we should see that if we check the log again, that we've connected through. So the first thing is we need that the Cloudflare agent installed, or Cloudflare D, Cloudflared. Choco install Cloudflare. So that is just Cloudflare with a D on the end. And of course, that is available up on the Chocolatey community repository. Okay, so that's been installed. So the Cloudflare D agent, or binary itself, allows you to open up tunnels from the client on demand. So you can do Cloudflare, keyboards on the front again, Cloudflare access. So of course, we're looking at client connectivity today. You can also use this for things like RDP connections and SSH connections, basically any network connection you can think of, which then allows you to RDP through the tunnel, as an example, rather than over the internet. But today, we're not doing an RDP, we're just doing TCP, because it's just a TCP port that we're looking at. And we need to tell it what host name is the host name for our tunnel. So I do -- host name, and this is that address that was in the config on my server. And then I tell it what I want to refer to this tunnel as on my local machine. And in this case, I could say localhost, but because I've redirected ccm.toast.dev to the localhost loopback, I'm specifically calling it ccm.toast.dev. And then the port is that same Choco port, which is what I configured in the server configuration as well. Now, if I run this, what's going to happen is it is going to basically take over my terminal, because now the Cloudflare D binary is running. It's opened that tunnel. Well, it has begun to open that tunnel. And what it's doing at the moment is it's waiting for something to try and use that tunnel, and then it will authenticate the request and either fail or allow the connection through. Now, I had some fun and games trying to get this to work while I was demoing it, but I'm willing to give it a try. Actually, let's install a browser that might work a bit better. That might have been my issue. Yeah. Cool. So let's fire up Chrome and make it our default. Don't sign in. Set as default. Cool. Okay, so let's restart. The Chocolatey Agent service. And hopefully what it's going to do is try and connect. Yes. So what it's doing here is, actually, I know exactly what it's doing here, and it skips me ahead to the next bit. So actually, what I can do to show what I was hoping to show there is on my local machine, if I try and connect to the web interface for Chocolatey Central Management over the tunnel, which, as a reminder, was tunnel-ccm-web, what you'll see is it's actually redirected me to GitHub. So in my configuration in Cloudflare Zero Trust, I've used GitHub as an identity provider. And so what I've said is for the web interface, the user needs to be a member of a specific organization. And within that organization, the user needs to be part of a specific team. And I'll show that in just a second. But what happened there, because this is an incognito window and I'm not logged into anything yet, what it did when I tried to open up the web interface, the web interface through the tunnel, it went, all right, but I need to know who you are. And GitHub's your identity provider, so it took me to GitHub. I logged in, and then it did all of its checks, and it goes, okay, you're good to go. And it took me back through the tunnel, and now I'm at the CCM web interface. How that works is in the config for the web, I've said to allow admins, and effectively, that's not a nice view for it. I've said to the Vero group, okay. I've said effectively for GitHub, they need to be a member of the toastit.dev, toastit-dev organization, and a member of the admin team, which my account happens to be. Now, there are a lot of identity providers available. So everything from, there's of course Azure AD, Google Workspace, even non-workspace Google, Okta. I've of course used LinkedIn, and a bunch of it, even down to just, I've got something that's not on the list, but it's SAML compliant, so I will use that. Now, some of these, if you look at the difference between, say, Google Workspace and Google, is Google Workspace sets it up so that you can use groups to control that access. And for each of them, it does provide good documentation on how to do the setup for that identity provider as well. But Google Workspace allows you to inspect the groups from users, and Google doesn't. So then you might say, okay, I'm going to do my rules based on email addresses, for example. Now, why that tunnel wasn't working for me is because of how I have configured my my agent settings, which is, rather than allowing a specific group with a specific organization and team membership is instead it's using service auth, which is basically saying as long as the incoming connection includes a service token, and in this case I've given it a specific one for the Chocolatey agent, then allow it through. So let's have a look at what that looks like. Here, rather than just running it like this, so if I had have told it that to allow admins through, when it got to this point, instead of erroring, it would have opened up in the browser and asked me to log in. And once I logged in, it would allow the connection through. But that gets back into the same issue as with the VPN, where you're relying on someone remembering to run the Cloudflare D tunnel on the client for you. And of course, that's where service tokens come in. And the first part of that is using them. So on that Cloudflare command, this keyboard is not long for this word, I think. We pass in a client ID and a client secret, and these are configured. These have been generated in the Cloudflare Zero Trust web interface, and then included in that policy. And like my salts earlier of hidden them behind variables, just so that I'm not broadcasting them on the live stream. But if I run this, and if I restart the service, hopefully we see that it connects. Cool. So it has managed to connect to the CCM server. It's pulled the certificate from there. It is now checking for outdated packages, and then we should see that it's reported into CCM. So if we go back to CCM, just log it on this machine because it's easier than jumping around VMs. We should see that the managed computer count has jumped up to 4, and our remote client is now checked in. So that means the tunnel's working, which is awesome. Of course, part of the problem here, as I mentioned before, is now we don't want, we don't want a terminal running just for the tunnel, and we don't want to rely on someone to remember to run the tunnel. So what we want is this tunnel running persistently on the client. And we can do that with a little bit of setup. What I'm going to be doing is, if I get rid of that, I've got a script here that, close that, close that. I've got a script here that's going to be pulling the token information from my stored credentials, and we'll see how I load those up in a second. And then we run the exact same command that I just ran, Cloudflare D, access TCP, that address, what I want it locally, and the ID and the secret. So that's a script that's sitting on my hard drive. And I need to install some prerequisites to get this going. So there's a PowerShell module that I need called Credential Manager, and I need it available to all users. So I set the scope to all users. So effectively what I'm about to do is I'm going to set up this script to run as a service, and specifically as the local service account rather than the local system account, just because the local system account is has a lot of permissions that we don't need to expose. So I installed it for all users so that that local system account can access it. So I've installed that Credential Manager PowerShell module, and now I need to install some things via Chocolatey, which is NSSM, which is a service manager, and PSExec. What PSExec is being used for is executing commands as the local system, which is how we will load in the credentials. Yep, let's go run those. And I've already got a script on this tunnel setup. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is make this bigger so that everyone can actually see it. Let's make it big. There we go. The first thing we're going to do is load in those credentials. So I've created a hash table here with the information for each credential, basically the client ID and the client secret. And then we're using PSExec to run as local service and execute the command that's going to load in those credentials. And what I've done here, you'll see a lot of null equals and string redirection. All that is because I was playing with wrapping this up as a Chocolatey script, which is something you could absolutely do with Chocolatey script, Chocolatey package, which is something you could do to then easily just install the package and have the tunnel set up on a client, rather than having to go through all these steps manually. So we want to install these credentials. So we'll run that section. And all going well, we won't see any red, that's good. And then we're going to set up the service itself. So I'm calling this the Chocolatey Agent tunnel. And effectively what we're going to be doing is telling it to run that script that we just saw before, the ccmtunnel.ps1. And we're saying basically run PowerShell with that script. Once that's done, we actually install the service using NSSM by passing in all that stuff that we just did above. And then we change some settings about it. So by default, when we've created this service, it's going to be running as ourselves. So we say, no, actually, go and run it as the local service. We're going to give it a nice display name so that it looks good in the GUI tools in Windows, and give it a description as well. Then we'll start that service that we've just created and restart the Chocolatey Agent service so that it uses that tunnel, rather than waiting for the next time it does a sync. So let's create our tunnel, create our service, and then now that the service is running, the tunnel is up, and we'll restart Chocolatey Agent. So let's see what that looks like in the services GUI. Chocolatey, why am I? There we go. So that's the Chocolatey Agent. Oh, I call it Cloudflare. There we go. There's the other one. So we've got the Chocolatey Agent service that's currently running, and we've got the actual tunnel service running as well. Now, one thing you might want to do is make the Chocolatey Agent service depend on the tunnel. And one thing that we've noticed, one thing that I've noticed is that Sometimes the tunnel tries to start too soon on a system boot. So you might want to change that to delayed start as well. But what we should see now is our, let's get the log back up. What we should see is no. Did I not close the other tunnel? Let me close some things and make sure all that's working. Close that, close that. Let's stop the service, restart the tunnel. And then start the agent. And then we'll go back into Notepad++. You should see that it's starting to come back up. Cool. I have a feeling that I have accidentally got the tunnel running twice, which isn't good. Let me just double check something here. Okay. Unfortunately, I've done something in there to mess up the demo. Of course, it's quite likely that with my keyboard on the fritz, I've accidentally mistyped something. So rather than sit here and try and debug it for the next, yes, it is all live. So rather than sit here and try and debug it for the remainder of the stream, I will see if Paul's around to bring him back in and see if there's any questions.
Hey, yes, I am around. There is no questions in the chat at the moment. It's actually been very, very quiet. If you've got any questions in the chat, much quieter than usual. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's Christmas. Everybody's trying to be nice and not naughty before Santa to come and give them presents. Could be that. It could be everybody's just shy on the stream today. I'm not sure.
Just tired from the end of the year. Everyone's.
It could be. Maybe they're all as well shocked at how bad your keyboard is, and
Yeah,
they're rapidly repeating keys. So
that's part of why it wasn't on wireless.
yeah,
So I don't
it's
know.
definitely a keyboard you wouldn't want to code on.
Yeah.
But no, one of the questions that I was thinking while you were going through all of this is how would an organization look to sort of roll out the Cloudflare tunnel if that's how they would want to have the machines connect in that way, because they might have your branch offices and they might not have a WAN, they might have on the internet. What would be the best way to kind of roll that out?
So I would recommend. I would recommend wrapping up all the bits that are part of that and do it as a Chocolatey package. What you will find is there's a chicken and egg problem. So you'll want to do it as a say a CCM deployment, but because the agents aren't checking in yet, they can't get a deployment. You might, and what you can do as well is use these tunnels for connectivity into your internal repositories. But of course, until you've got your tunnel running, you can't access the internal repositories. So what you might need to do is create them as create your Chocolatey package, and then take that to the clients and install it as a from a local source, basically. If you've got another RMM tool, potentially you can install it via that as well. But having it as a Chocolatey package means it's just one command and it just repeats the process on demand, which is nice.
Yeah, if we've got an MSI now for
Yes.
Chocolatey itself, Chocolatey CLI. So if you, as you mentioned, if you've got another RMM tool or some other method of deployment, you could always deploy the MSI that gets Chocolatey installed, then deploy the other bits and pieces that you need there, license extension, etc., Chocolatey Agent, or you could go, do it as a local source. So it's you can use packages from a local folder to install from. We don't recommend you use it kind of as your production system, but for installing something like this, you're
Yeah.
just the odd package. It's
Yeah.
absolutely fine, and that's what
Just to solve that
use that
chicken
one.
and egg problem to get you
Yeah,
bootstrapped, and then you've got access to CCM, you've got access to your repository
exactly.
going forward. Yeah.
And that's another type of kind of package that is not common. Well, you don't see them on the community repository, obviously. So it's configuration packages, we'd kind of call them, where you're actually deploying a configuration that you want onto the computer, onto your Windows computer, and kind of configuring that rather than software, which is a common thing, that the common package type, I suppose, is be a software package where you're deploying software. We will have a blog post coming up about that soon, actually. That she's talking about a configuration package. Now you can use Chocolatey to deploy configuration onto one of your endpoints. So yeah, keep an eye on our blog for that. But we're actually we're a little bit behind. We're a little bit ahead of time, so it's absolutely fine to kind of wrap up just now. Any thoughts, Josh, about it didn't towards the end there? It kind of I was going to say fell apart. That's terrible. It didn't fall apart. The gremlins get into the works.
Mm.
But anything you wish we could have shown today, or anything that you didn't show that you wanted to
Um,
kind of talk about?
so if we did have more time, doing the repositories over this connection is quite good as well, because that means that then you can lock your repository behind the firewall as well and not have to expose it to the internet, but still allow remote clients to connect to it. And that sort of completes the Chocolatey for Business puzzle from a client perspective. Because then not only do you have CCM for the reporting and the deployments, but then you can install your internal packages as well. But of course, that's its own exercise as well. I mean, the fundamentals are the same. You're opening a port, you're pointing, effectively in that case, pointing your Chocolatey source at the tunnel, and it just magically popping up out the other end on the whatever your repository server is. And it is really neat to see in action, but trying to condense that down to an hour just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, obviously we're limited by time, as you said, and that means we need to compress a lot of things and chop a lot of bits out that we want to talk about. But if we get enough, feedback, and I'm going to pop that onto the screen, it's as if we plan these things. It just it just so goes so smoothly. That's the wrong one. That's the one. If you give us feedback and it's what you would like to see, you would like to see more of, maybe you want to pick up more about the Cloudflare part of it, or kind of what Josh has talked about there. If you want whatever you want to see, please complete the survey there, the live stream feedback survey. It's on screen. It's ch0.co/stream survey. It'll take you 10 seconds to do. There's only one mandatory question, and that is just rate the stream out of 10. It's basically a slider. That's all it is. The other two questions are about giving us feedback on content that you'd like to see in the future. So yeah, please fill that out. And as I said, if we get enough kind of feedback, if we get enough interest, then we'll certainly come back and talk about more about securing the connections between Chocolate Agent and Chocolatey Central Management. So yeah, okay. Well, what we'll do today then is we'll wrap up then. Just a huge thanks to Josh for taking us through the demos and explaining how you can secure your Chocolate Agent and Chocolate Central Management connections. We kind of looked at Cloudflare there, talked a little bit with VPNs and other bits and pieces. Hopefully that gives you something you can build on. So, we only show you so much here. We only take you through what we think is interesting, what customers have told us, what our community members have told us will be interesting. And it's things that we hope that you can build upon, because your environment is obviously unique to you. And everybody's environment is obviously very tailor-made for what their organization or business requires. So take away what we've talked about today and just kind of build on that, and let us know how you get on. We'd be really interested to know how your organization or your company is actually looking at using Chocolate Central Management, how you're kind of securing your connections and working with your endpoints. As I mentioned at the start, sorry, Josh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and do remember to keep an eye out on the Chocolatey blog next week for a companion to this, which will have more information and links to relevant docs and all sorts.
And that'll be just not quite in time, but it'll be a little bit ahead of Christmas, so people can take that away and they can, on Christmas Day, in between courses, they can probably have a read of the blog post and educate themselves on how to secure connections between Chocolate Agent and Chocolate Central Management. It's like a gift we wrap up for you. Really, we are kind of. I should wear my Santa Claus hat. We're being Santa Claus for you, and we're giving you that gift. So you're welcome. But yeah, keep an eye out on the blog for that. But yeah, I kind of mentioned at the start, we have I've mentioned it again there. We have a survey. Please just complete it. Just take 10 seconds out of your life and just let us know what you'd like to see. We really do appreciate it. And again, the link is on the screen there. I'm going to point to it. Is it there? I'm not. I don't know. I can't point to it. Is it? No, it's that. It's that way. So you know what it is. You can see it. So yeah, the link is there. I don't know why I do this. You can also get notified of any of the chocolatey content that we produce by joining our community hub on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, and clicking the notification bell. Really important, because when you do that, you get notified of when we're streaming. You can also follow us on the socials, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're on all of those, and you can find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org, and in the description of wherever you found this video. This is the last live stream of 2024, as I said, and it's the last product spotlight in this format. So if you watch the Unpacking Software live stream, and that's on the third Thursday of each month, or you listen to the podcast, you'll know that Stephen Valdinger, customer solutions manager, you know him. You've seen James as well. So Stevie and his team will be picking up the live stream on the 6th of February, and that's the first Thursday in February. So going forward, Stevie will be the face here. You won't have to put up with me anymore, which is maybe a blessing and a curse. I don't know, whatever way you want to play that one. But thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. If you celebrate Christmas and New Year, I hope you have a fantastic time. If you don't, have a great holiday. And as we say in Scotland, Lang may your lum reek. Take care. Bye bye.